Welcome back. I'm starting a little bit early today. For those of you that are not familiar with me, I am Caroline Best, founder of the Tao of Horsemanship Academy. And this is Wisdom of Tao, the Way of Inner Alchemy. Episode 2, we're talking about the power of humility, path to authenticity today. And this is, I think, for me, it's been a long personal journey, and it continues to be eye-opening for me personally. And maybe that's just because on a conscious level, an awareness level about myself and just those around me, it's definitely something that is lacking in our horsemanship across the board. It's lacking in our humanness, in our humanity, but it's also lacking in our horsemanship. The level of humility or humbleness, the ability to be humble. So I'm going to speak, as I always do, very candidly and very openly, and I have some things written down and printed out so I stay on track. But I'll also, for those of you that know me, I'm going to speak, I'm going to share with whatever just comes to my mind at the same time. So on a personal level with humility, I'm going to be sharing some things with you during this episode, how learning to become humble and learning about humility, how it has positively shaped my life in general, obviously, especially my relationships with both two and four-legged. So it's not just my horses, but with people too, and how that journey began. I certainly never thought about the word humility. I may have read about it, heard about it, but I never thought about humility until I got back into horses and made this my career, made it my work on myself. So humility is about embracing modesty, releasing pride and arrogance, and seeing yourself as part of something greater. I think that in and of itself, for me, sums it up for me, about me. And the basis, I believe, knowing myself and also doing private coaching with students and knowing people along the way, when you have huge trust issues, it's really hard to be humble because the lack of humility becomes a defense mechanism. And if we can just understand the root cause of a lack of humility, and my root cause is the word trust, lack of trust, that's your path, your roadmap to understanding humility and why it's so important to have humility and be humble. Now, humility doesn't mean you're not strong. It doesn't mean you don't have confidence. Personally, both in my personal life with other people, as well as the horsemanship aspect of what I do teaching, language gets really misconstrued. And I talk about this a lot in my big program, Dream Writing Partnership program. The way we identify with certain words and understand certain words and the way we use them, our perception of them, is not always correct. And so you can look at somebody like myself who has a lot of confidence. For the most part, I do. I'm a pretty confident person. And that might come across as being arrogant. It might come across as being cocky. It might come across as not having humility. But it doesn't. It did back in the day before I understood what humility was and that I was lacking humility. I had what I refer to as a false sense of confidence, a false sense of bravado. And it definitely was arrogant. Oh my gosh, it was definitely arrogant. But I didn't even see that. I didn't even see that. And it wasn't until I got back into horses that I allowed myself the level of vulnerability and intimacy needed to identify what we're talking about today. Because remember, I knew I had trust issues. And for me, that was the baseline, the deep rooted cause of my lack of humility. It was the cause of my bravado, my confidence, so to speak, my arrogance. And I'm bringing this up because I see this all the time, and I see it in my students, and I see it in other professionals. I work with a lot of different professionals, and not just in my specific um, profession as a horse trainer or instructor. I see it also working with other professionals, whether they're vets, they're body workers, they're farriers, just other equine professions. The lack of humility and the level of ego is shocking, and it gets louder and more um, harder to be around as I get older, because I'm choosing to practice more and more of the Taoist way. I stepped away from it, as I mentioned briefly in the intro in the first podcast, the episode 1. I stepped away from it for a while. I got burnout in work, got overwhelmed with family crisis and my own personal journey through all of that, like so many of us. And I'm now coming out on the other side after spending a couple of years in deep reflection. That's the best way I can put it, in deep reflection. And again, coming back to creating more of an ashram here at my facility where there's no one but me and my horses. So there's no outside interference unless I allow it. And so I've reclaimed my boundaries. And in so many ways, that's a whole nother podcast. Because a lot of the people that I was letting in did not care about me, and they did not care about my horses. And therefore that negative energy really took a hold and added to everything else that was going on. We have to be so careful, so careful. But getting back to what this episode is all about, the power of humility and why it's so amazing and positive and powerful. So on a deeper level, it's recognizing your imperfections, but you have to be in a place where you allow that, where you feel at your most vulnerable, right? Who the heck wants to admit when they're wrong, let alone are we even aware when we're wrong? And again, it comes back in my story, in my journey of getting back into horses. I had spent my adult life in my 20s and 30s. And anybody that's gone through trauma can relate to this. If you understand it, you'll be able to relate to it. You've spent so many years in toxic relationships. And my family dynamic was very violent and toxic. It wasn't violent in a physical sense, it was violent in alcoholism and mental and emotional. So there was a lot of yelling and fighting, and it was just your body, just like the horse's body, just absolutely gets flooded with adrenaline so much and cortisol that it's so toxic. Your body is just flooded with toxins, and all you can do is survive. So I was surviving for many years as a teenager. And then I had that wonderful therapist, as I mentioned in the first episode, that helped me get back to me and get away from that negativity through Eastern medicine and philosophy, specifically meditation. And that's how I became a practicing Taoist as a teenager. So fast forward from, going to college and being free and out of the toxic, to the most part, out of a lot of the toxicity, your body is still overwhelmed. I didn't realize what I'm talking about today. I had no idea when I was in my 20s. And I know doing the private coaching at the level that I do with thousands of students and the level of workshops that I have, that I host, I know so many of us can relate to this. You just don't know what you don't know. And it didn't matter what kind of books I read. I was no longer in therapy in my 20s. I did revisit it shortly in my 30s, only to fire both therapists within a short period of time, because that talk therapy, I was over it. I wasn't being triggered by it, but I'm like, I don't need to talk about this anymore. I just need you to know that I'm here and I want to get there. And I don't know how to get there. And that's when I met my life coach, who was a client of mine, and it was just amazing. That's what turned me on to coaching. But long story short, I didn't realize how overloaded my body still was, and that in my 20s and early 30s, I was still processing, decompressing, but I wasn't releasing. And I didn't understand that at all. I didn't know. I just knew that I was processing, decompressing. I was still surviving, but also thriving in areas. And when I got back in, and also don't want to jump forward to when I got back into horses, but I was a go-getter, and I was ambitious, I was driven, I lived in my third chakra, and I'm going to talk more about that. So over time, I was like, oh, the anxiety attacks are over. I learned how to meditate. I learned how to do the breath work and get back into my body and not get flooded and overwhelmed by my emotions, which shut me down and made me freeze and go catatonic. So I overcame that. But then in my immaturity and lack of experience and whatever else was going on inside of me, I just stopped meditating. And all of a sudden, I was like strengthening my third chakra, my solar plexus, my fire, my purpose, my respect, my boundaries. I'm like, I'm going after it. This is what I want out of life, and I'm going to get it. And I did. But in that process, I was really feeding my ego, and I didn't realize it. I was really feeding my ego. And I'd also stepped away from horses and doing things in my life that were very cognitive. I was still reading, I was still talking and thinking, but it was very superficial. I wasn't living it. I didn't have a living example like a child or a horse to show me exactly who I was, to reflect back upon me that you can say one thing, but it's what I feel from you and how you act that really tells me who you are and where you are. And so there was no humility. I didn't even think about being humble or how important that is. And the power of humility is so the first word that comes to mind is peace. It's absolutely peaceful because you're no longer struggling to control a situation, to identify or be a certain way. You are where you are. You feel and understand the impact of your actions, your words. You accept them, and you're willing to do what it takes to find flow, to find harmony. Doesn't mean you don't stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean you don't talk about things that are uncomfortable, but it's a different perspective and a different way of being when you bring those things up. It's like I say this to my clients all the time. Here's a great example with horses. So many of my students come and say, well, I've been taught not to look the horse in the eye ever because I'm a predator and they're a prey animal and I'm going to scare them. And I say to them, that's wrong. And let me tell you why. Number one, you always want to look the horse in the eye because the eyes are the windows to the soul. The eye is the first place on a horse that they are going to share with you how they feel and express it. That's how expressive horses are, unless they're shut down, of course. But when a horse is feeling safe and comfortable with you and they trust you, they're going to really show you who they are. You must look at them, but it is how you look at them that makes all the difference. So you can look at them hard and intense and attacking and aggressive, or you can look at them strong yet softly and have that conversation with the power of intention in your mind where I love you, but I still need you to work with me. I still have boundaries. I still have requests, but I always love you, and that is unconditional. And so we're taking one example and I'm showing you two ways of going about looking at anything. You can look at it severely with aggression, intensity, and you can soften that look. And the horse feels everything. We feel everything. They're tuned in. They're super sharp with their senses. We know that. And this is a good example to take into everything in life. It's like I still I still have confidence, but I'm not arrogant anymore. Sometimes my confidence is I'm a little too cocky, but that's going away. That's been really going away. And what I have found, and this is personal, this is from me personally, with a lot of people, whether they're students or they're other professionals, is the lack of humility that I see in them. It's like the more I become humble, the less I see around me, the less I see around me. And if there was one word, and I've thought a lot about this for many years, that I would use to describe humanity, the lack of or the abundance of humanity, it would be humility. It is such a big word. It makes me want to cry. It is just so powerful and influential. When you have humility, you show up differently. Your aura changes, your energy field changes. There's a softness and a strength about you. Um, how I got here definitely was through the horse because, again, I had huge trust issues. And even though I was previously married for 15 years before my marriage now, and I had, wonderful, I still do friendships from college and a close knit, group of friends. Um, there was always this divide for me. It's like, yes, I can talk about anything. I've always been an open book, but it was almost like a detour. Like, yeah, I can talk about it, but I'm still not going to let you in. You're never really going to see how I really feel or how much it really scares me or hurts me or bothers me. I just couldn't. That was turned off. The faucet was turned off. It wasn't that I was even aware that I was being that way. Looking back, I'm older and wiser now. I'm like, wow, I didn't even have it in me to talk like I'm talking today at this level. And because I had such huge trust issues and they were buried so deep because I was surviving for so long, when I got back into horses, and that's something that I wanted more than anything, I wanted it more than children. Um, yeah, I wanted it more than my marriage at the time. Absolutely. It was definitely, like I said, I lost my marriage, but I found myself. And it wasn't like it came in like a flood. It was little trickles, a little bit of like water flowing in here and there to just give me a taste of what it felt like to free myself, to allow myself to be open and vulnerable. And it was my Trinity, my first three horses, that I allowed myself this path. And I think I mentioned in episode 1 that when I got back into horses, I thought, like I hear often with equestrians, just because you've been riding your whole life and you've been around horses your whole life does not make you an expert. It does not give you the knowledge that you think. And I had no idea. There I go again. I just was like, yeah, I know a lot about horses. I'm really good with horses. I know a lot about horses. I can ride any buck, I'm great. I can hang on. Takes a lot for me to fall off. Oh my gosh. And so I bit the dust on that because it's like, wow, if it wasn't for my growth mindset, my open mindset, and my attitude that I'm just gonna learn and take in everything I can, and not get stuck like we all can. And I certainly have experienced before where you just stop learning and stop growing because it's not because you don't want to, it's because your ego won't allow you. And your ego always gets in the way of being humble. It always gets in the way. And why? You can trace it back to feeling insecure. You can trace it back to feeling unsure, vulnerable, trust issues, superiority. There's ego. The key here is figuring out what's the cause of you not being able to let go and be vulnerable and be humble. What is causing you from not being able to go there? Until you address that, until you're aware of it, find it, you're not going to be able to allow yourself humility, to become humble, which to me is the truest path to authenticity. Because at that point, it's not like you don't care. You don't care in a good way. It's like, hey, this is who I am. It's not like take it or leave it, but I don't have to pretend to be anybody. I don't have to be defensive. I don't have to put roadblocks up and keep you at bay for no reason because I'm not sure, I don't trust. It is such a sense of peace because you finally can just let go of all of that. And you're like, yeah, this is who I am, the good, bad, and the ugly. I'm always a work in progress. It doesn't mean you're making excuses for any behavior, but you're always open to learning with the understanding that you're human. You are human. I see this in my students. I see a lot of the lack of humility and a lot of arrogance. Um, and you wouldn't say they're arrogant. It's not like you're not sweet and you're not a good person. You are a good person, but you've got a roadblock up. You won't learn. You think you know everything, or you just can't be vulnerable and allow yourself the opportunity to continue learning even when it's difficult. And again, we go back to the root cause. We can all trace our weaknesses. Some of them are inherited, some of them are DNA, some of them are past lives. Depends on what you believe. I believe in all of it. Comes generationally, passed down. But a lot of our issues with ourselves and our lack of growth and our lack of thriving and feeling good about ourselves and life, it all comes back to how we were raised. What was your family dynamic like? I mean, I don't know how many of you have been in therapy or read books and they talk about the inner child. Until you heal that inner child, until that inner child feels worthy, feels loved, feels beautiful, feels whatever it needs to feel, you're not going to be able to give that to yourself or anyone else fully. And that inhibits us from reaching this level of peace. In my personal growth, and I was able to identify with this, my brothers were too, early on. So I think that was my knee that just cracked. It didn't hurt though. I think I became conscious of this definitely as a teenager, but it's like it's like you only know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. It's like experience. It's experience. The more you experience and the more you grow from experience, the more you learn, period. So, like another example would be you and I could experience the same lesson in horsemanship. And I'm going to say I'm more experienced. So I'm going to experience more and understand more and maybe grow more. Your lack of experience, you're only going to be able to grow so much. But the more you grow, the more you're going to be able to understand how much that lesson has to teach. And it's like anything in life. And it's like when I first wrapped my brain around the fact that because of my wonderful therapy in high school, that my parents were never going to be able to give me what I needed, and that I had to identify with that inner child to the best of my ability, which was a lifelong process. Um, I was going to stay stuck. I was going to stay angry. And you get it on one level, but it was my first level of experiencing that understanding. As I grew and matured over the years, I got to understand it more deeply and more deeply with more experience and an open mind to learn. I was able to say, wow, I get that. I can understand that better. I can deal with it better. And where I'm going with that is the huge disappointment, abandonment, trust issues, disappointment that my mom and dad couldn't give me. And we were loved, and I knew I was loved. The confusion was the drinking, and that, you're loved and you're told how special you are and you feel special, and then it's taken away because of the alcoholism. So it was a constant conflict and confusion. And as you either understand or can hear from me, frustration. So as I can, I'm getting older and I'm growing, that understanding of that inner child takes on more and more. And I begin to say, hey, how I am acting in this relationship or this type of relationship or this type of situation, is that really who I am, my nature, or is that a learned behavior? Is that something I picked up, a coping mechanism? Yeah. Or is it just something I learned? This is how we act. This is how we dealt with things in my family. And that's getting pretty deep. Um, and getting back to humility, getting back to horses and realizing I'm nothing, but having the right attitude and mindset to go, I know I don't know anything and I want to learn everything I can. So I need to understand myself enough to know that I'm going to put roadblocks up. I'm going to get defensive. I'm going to fight this lack of knowing because I think I know everything. But the horses wouldn't let me because I cared so much about them more than I cared about myself, more than I cared about my trainer or my instructor telling me, get after that horse, do that. I have no regrets there. I never went after my horses. I never did anything that compromised the integrity of our trust. That I am very proud of, for the lack of a better word. But I didn't. But it still doesn't mean I did not have issues with finding humility, because every time my ego got in the way, whether I thought it needed to be done this way or I was controlling the situation with my horse, that's when my horses would reflect back to me with whatever they needed to, that this isn't working for me, because I cared enough I was able to see and listen and hear them say, this isn't working, Caroline. Try something else. I'll let you know when it is. And that is a huge roadblock in today's equestrians. It doesn't matter what discipline you're in. It could be natural horsemanship. I see it in the 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 type of horsemanship that is supposed to represent, softness and compassion and, a lot of really healthy dynamics between horses and humans. And I still see, the need for control. This brings me back to what I introduced you to in the first episode, Woo Wee. And we'll be diving into other episodes about Woo Wee, the law of non-action. It's how do you still take the same path, but the path of least resistance, as I say, with your horse, or the path of least resistance in any relationship. You can still have a conversation. You don't have to have a confrontation. You can still have a conversation, but you don't have to have a confrontation. How are you able to release and say what you need to say and make your point, but it doesn't have to lead into something aggressive? You're in control, for the lack of a better word, of what you put into it and what you say and how you handle it. A lot of people struggle, and I understand, so did I, struggle with confrontation. And am I too aggressive? Or it makes me feel really uncomfortable because I grew up in an abusive background. So I don't want my fire chakra because there's so much anger still in there. And this isn't me speaking anymore. This is a lot of my students, and I get it because I've been there myself. And you've got to learn how to release those emotions. It takes time. And then they're gone. And then you're able to come in and have a conversation. Like, I didn't like how you spoke to me. Now, you're not in control of how that person responds, but you are in control of how you respond. So getting back, I told you we'd be all over the place with this. So, as I mentioned in the first episode, before I became a devoted student, got back into horses of many disciplines, many, centered riding, classical dressage, working equitation, certified here, reining, liberty, natural horsemanship, to said reining, cowmanship. Oh my gosh, till I got back into learning as much as I could, I understood one thing. I needed the right attitude and the right mindset. Sounds easier, right? I think, again, getting back to the root cause of why we are afraid to be humble, or are you humble? What is humility to you? What does it mean to you? How does it show up in your life? Why are we so afraid? Why are you afraid? What have you got to lose? And why can't you lose yourself? I had some of the most profound dreams of my life that I will, when I met my second husband, of course we weren't married, and I met Kurt, my husband today. When I met him, wow, that was like opening not just a rabbit hole, Pandora's box of possibilities on such an intimate level, not just physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy, and then mental, cognitively, challenging conversations, challenging thoughts, challenging me to think and about myself and to think about things. And this is for both of us. One of the most profound dreams I had when I made up my mind that I was going to move to Florida, leave Pennsylvania. I was divorced, and I was going to move to Florida with my business and my 3 horses and be with my husband. One of these dreams, Carl Jung would have loved to analyze this. This is so cool. This is just one. I had 3 that one evening, and I had come down to spend a week with him. We saw each other, it was long distance, and we saw each other every month. And I came down to Florida that that month. And I remember these vivid, prolific, vivid dreams. And one of them was I'm in space, okay? But I'm in a room, and I'm in a room that has no walls. But the room has pictures, the room has window frames, doorways. It was a kitchen. Of all rooms, it was a kitchen, a chef's kitchen. We love to cook, so this is deep. You can analyze this all you want. So it was a chef's kitchen, so it had everything. It had knives and all sorts of utensils and pots and pans and an island and plenty. It was beautiful, but it had no walls, really had no floor. So as I'm standing in this room and I'm looking down and I'm in space, but somehow there was Earth. But I wasn't on Earth, I was in space. It wasn't until I had and I'm stunned. Let me back up. I'm stunned because I'm like, it's whoa, is this real? Now it felt real. And I remember, is this real? Like my hands are out, like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to move because it looked like glass. I'm standing on air. What's beneath me? I was afraid. So I was taking in everything. Like I was surveying, like I could see how beautiful this kitchen was. And it had everything you could want. Isn't this interesting? To pick and choose from. It was endless. But here was this door frame. It did have a door. And here was a window that was open, a window frame. And I had to get the courage. Can I walk? What if I walk? Am I going to fall through? So, for whatever reason, I knew I needed to go to the door or the window. I first went to the window frame because the window was open. It was just a frame. And I remember looking out the window. And now, as I'm looking out the window, it's almost if you're afraid of heights, and I'm not afraid of heights, but I can't do heights or I get intense vertigo. But it's almost like looking out and you get that rush of fear, like, or if you're in a roller coaster or some amusement park where you're in whatever it is, that just like you're you're in the air, like everything's in the air. And there's nothing holding you. And I just remember looking out that window. And as I looked out the window, everything, the feeling that I had inside of me was everything just came up like air and went out the window into space. And I pulled myself back because I was absolutely frightened, wasn't even the right word, because I'd never experienced this like this. Where am I? So I went to the door, and I remember opening the door, had the same effect of space and nothingness. But this time I fell through the door and I'm in space and I'm falling. And I've never had a dream like this, but I wasn't scared. Now, when I poked my head through the window, I filled up with that, like, being, like a roller coaster. Like when you go up, you go down and you go up. What is that feeling? Just like your whole insides come up and you're like, woo! It wasn't as scary. When I first fell through the door, there was that instant of, should I be afraid? Do I need to be afraid? But I let it go. And I remember falling and just looking at my hands and my arms. And I just let it all go. And that's how I woke up. And it felt great. And that was just one of several prolific dreams. And all of these dreams were, what's the word? There's many of them. They told the future. It wasn't just what I was feeling at the time, but each of these dreams ended up coming true in some form, whether it was a deeper feeling or something that actually happened. It's really wild that it all happened that evening. For me, that is the closest I've ever come to letting go and actually feeling like I'm letting go. Letting go of what? Obviously, a lot of stuff that I didn't need because it felt so great. So, my mantra back then, when I got back into horses, that worked for me, doesn't mean you don't lose your way. I've lost my way since then. Because when I got back into horses, I got divorced and I lost everything, but I found myself. But it was a really tough time. Um, Moved down to Florida, and that was a really hard transition in so many ways. On a personal level, I left my family, my friends, my community, which meant everything to me. I brought my business with me. I could travel. I had a really strong business in New England, in Vermont. I had a second location for many years. I was fine with that, but I was really lonely, really missed my community, my family and my friends, and what I had developed. And I never, ever to this day, I have not found it here. But I stayed open. I stayed mindful. I did my best to be in touch with myself when I messed up, admit my mistakes, and especially asked for help. Always asking for help. So, for those of you that would like to feel this level of peace and surrender and ease and flow, and just let go of the constant worry, anxiety about how others feel about you, think about you, control your ego. You have to trust yourself. You have to trust the process and trust yourself. And the horses have always been a wonderful mirror and a wonderful guide, but only if you really open yourself up to being wrong, until you're not wrong anymore. There's no right or wrong. It's a conversation. It's a conversation. Oops, that didn't work for you. I'm sorry. Show me. How can I do it differently? What works best for you? That didn't quite feel right for me. Can we meet here? Can we do it this way together? So, some steps to learning humility: listen to other people's ideas, be open to them, admit when you've made a mistake, let someone help you, let your horse. Ask for help when you need it, give credit to others for their contributions, and let your work and actions speak for themselves. Letting go of ego was never easy. It's never easy. It's a work in progress. Attitude, having the right attitude is everything. Being aware that, hey, I need to work on this. And I think caring about someone else more than you care about yourself in a healthy way. We're so used to protecting ourselves when we've been traumatized, when we've been victimized. That's how we survive, is protecting ourselves. But how much longer? It's exhausting. It's exhausting to constantly be protecting yourself. So humility is connected to the heart chakra. For those of you that know me, I work with the first 4 chakras specifically in my work with healing and connecting with horses. Why the first 4 chakras? Because they are the closest to sensory awareness and sensory processing. They will help you, the human, become or learn the language of Equus. Learn the silent language of Equus. Learn how horses truly communicate through energy, frequencies, heart chakra, heart coherence, nervous system regulation. So humility is connected to the heart chakra, representing a confident humility born from love and compassion, and also to the crown chakra, symbolizing spiritual humility and surrender to divine wisdom. Both perspectives show that humility arises from an openness and receptivity to others and a connection to a higher consciousness. So, like I said earlier, my love for my horses was stronger than anything. It guided me. That's all I cared about, is how does this make you feel? That's compassion. That's empathy. How do you feel? Does this hurt you? I don't want to hurt you. And that's the same for our two-legged relationships. They're the hardest. Horses are easy. I don't want to hurt you, but how do I say what I need to say? And that's a skill. That is a skill that we all can learn. In yogic tradition, an overactive or unbalanced solar plexus chakra, which is your fire chakra, your 3rd chakra, your heart is your 4th chakra, an overactive or unbalanced. And what did I say when I was in my 20s and 30s? I stepped away from my first chakra, my earth, my balance, my meditation, and I stepped right into my fire. My fire controlled everything. It was overactive and unbalanced. This is most directly associated with an inflated ego, an ego to protect yourself, arrogance, and aggression. There wasn't any aggression, but I definitely would wait, and then get triggered and break something. Conversely, the crown chakra and heart chakra are linked to the transcendence of ego and the cultivation of humility. So here's your pathway. How do I begin allowing myself to let go of what no longer serves me, what I don't need anymore, that doesn't help me? How do I get to a place of peace and harmony? Understand the heart chakra needs to get stronger. You need to balance that and strengthen that. And understand that your 3rd chakra, most likely, as well as your crown chakra, your 7th has taken over. So you're thinking too much and you're fighting too much to protect yourself. So I'll wrap it up just talking a little bit more about Taoism. Humility in Taoism, the power of yielding. In Taoism, humility is seen as a source of wisdom, strength, and inner peace. It is one of the 3 treasures of Taoism, alongside compassion and frugality, guiding us to live in harmony with the natural flow of life, of Tao. Taoist humility is not about diminishing oneself. It is about letting go of the ego's need for control, validation, what a word, validation, and superiority, and allowing our authentic nature to lead. The metaphor of water. Water is the perfect teacher of humility in Taoist thought. Flows to the low places. Water seeks the lowest ground, symbolizing the humble person who does not strive to rise above others, but finds strength in their natural place. It yields and overcomes through soft and yielding. Though soft and yielding, water wears down even the hardest stone, revealing that true power comes from flexibility not force. Accommodates and adapts. Water takes the shape of any vessel. Ooh, this is big. I see this in horsemanship all the time. This is what I teach. Water takes the shape of any vessel, teaching us to move with life's changes rather than resist them. The grace of non-striving, the woo-wee. Humility aligns with woo-wee, effortless action. I refer to it as the path of least resistance. The humble do not seek recognition or compete for status. As the Tao Te Ching says, he is free from self-display and therefore he shines, from self-assertion and therefore he is distinguished, from self-boasting and therefore his merit is acknowledged. By not striving to be seen, one's true nature shines naturally. Humility is true leadership. The Taoist sage leads without domination or force. Horsemanship. They inspire not by control, but by example. I refer to this as exemplary leadership. So seamlessly aligned with the Tao that their leadership feels like nature itself unfolding in horsemanship and in life. With horses, humility allows us to listen deeply, to meet them where they are, and to release our agenda for theirs. What do they need? It teaches us to pause, reflect, and adapt, just as water does. It is not a sign of inaction. It is the most profound form of connection and influence. When we embrace humility, we step into authentic leadership. We deepen our relationships, human and equine, and discover a quiet, powerful grace that needs no applause. And that's where I leave you, my friends, until the next episode, which will be next week, this time, and you're going to meet Nina. Nina is one of my students. She's here for the month of September. So she will have been working for almost 2 weeks with me and my 5 horses here. So we'll get to hear her speak a little bit about her experience, and it'll fall in nicely with what this podcast is all about. She's a very humble person naturally, one of the most gracious, beautiful people I've met. So I'm excited to share her with you. Until then, namaste, and may you always be one with horses. Bye-bye.